Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for October 9th, 2025. Today we're talking about Jerry, which is now closely approaching the northern Caribbean islands, and there are tropical storm warnings in effect for some of the islands in the far northern Caribbean. I'll go over what areas are those, and we're also going to go over a very, very interesting area of interest which has suddenly appeared in the far northern Atlantic. I'm going to show you the satellite imagery for it and just give you a general idea of what we are tracking. And yes, it has been designated Invest 96L, so it is definitely a pretty interesting feature. And again, I'll go over both of those things as well as other things happening in the tropics for this October 9th. So glad you could join. Let's start off by looking at the latest National Hurricane Center outlook. And obviously, we have Tropical Storm Jerry here, 65 miles per hour. So the winds upped a little bit as I thought that they would, and this is probably going to continue to intensify, especially as we head into the end of the week and into the weekend. And this is more than likely probably going to become a hurricane. But right now, winds at 65 miles per hour, minimum central pressure of 1,000 millibars, located at 16.5 north and 60.0 west. So this is just beginning to exit the MDR and make its closest approach to the northern Caribbean islands right now, moving west-northwest at 18 miles per hour. So this is also slowing down, especially compared to yesterday. But then there's also this very interesting little area here in the northern Atlantic which suddenly decided to appear today. And this is Invest 96L, and this has a very small chance of development because, number one, this is in the very far northern Atlantic, so there's not a very high likelihood that this will develop, but this also has a short period of time. But if you actually look at the satellite picture today, I must say that this does look kind of like a pretty interesting looking low pressure area. And some are saying that maybe we are even seeing a quick attempt at subtropical cyclogenesis occurring with this system. It's all a matter of course, if the National Hurricane Center deems that it is appropriate to designate a system, especially with these subtropical developments here. Sometimes the National Hurricane Center can be very, very stingy and picky about whether or not they want to designate it. So we'll see what happens. But right now they're only keeping it at a 10% chance, so my gut tells me probably not in terms of this developing. But we'll see. I'll go over the satellite image of this in a little bit. And then we are tracking, of course, the Eastern Pacific too, with the extensive activity that is going on there. We have Tropical Storm Priscilla continuing to weaken as of today, and this is going to continue to weaken and then eventually become a post-tropical system. And as I mentioned yesterday and the day before, or more like 2 days before that, most of its moisture is going to end up in the southwestern United States, and we do have a flood threat for especially Arizona as we head into the end of the week associated with Priscilla. So keep in mind of that. Octave, which became a post-tropical system, and no longer are we going to be tracking Octave anymore, so no need to worry about that. But there is Tropical Storm Raymond formed as of today. And this could actually impact the Baja Peninsula. Here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. I'm going to track parallel to the mainland Mexican coast, but then it begins to take a northward turn as we head towards the very end of the week into the Baja Peninsula. So we're probably going to be talking more about impacts here to Mexico. And obviously there are also tropical storm watches too. So we're going to have to watch Raymond here over the next several days. But looks like yet again another named storm to track here in the Eastern Pacific. And now here's a overall wide shot view of the Atlantic. You can see Jerry here, which is just approaching the northern Caribbean islands, producing quite aggressive convection. And then you also see, some of these waves in here along the ITCZ. Looks like maybe there's a wave coming off of Africa right now. And then you could see quite a very potent front here, which extends all the way from the southwestern Atlantic through the subtropics on up into the northeastern Atlantic here, and then tucked away in this very broad system here is a very small low, which you can see right here, and you can see that there's quite a bit of convective activity kind of centralized around a very small low here. And this is where Invest 96L is. And you can see it does look like a pretty interesting feature right now. I mean, it is again pretty centralized and compact where its low pressure is, and I think the latest surface analysis indicates that there is no affront attached to the small little low that we have in here. But we do have a very big sprawling front, which extends, again, pretty much throughout the entire eastern and central subtropics of the Atlantic. So definitely a very interesting feature here with 96L, and I'll zoom in on it in a little bit just to show you a little bit closer here. But in general, lots of activity happening here in the Atlantic, but obviously the main focus being Tropical Storm Jerry right now. And here's a up-close true color satellite imagery of it. And you can see still battling with the shear. That's one thing that is inhibiting the storm from intensifying further right now. In fact, the low-level center here kind of still zooming very quickly on off to the northwest, while all of the convective activity here with Jerry kind of gets suppressed to the east and southeastern portion of the storm. But because of that, there will be lots of impacts to be brought here to the northern Caribbean islands. As I mentioned, tropical storm warning is now in effect. And let me actually really quickly show you where that tropical storm warning is in effect for you here. Summaries of watches and warnings for Jerry. A tropical storm warning is in effect for Barbuda and Anguilla. A tropical storm, and also for St. Bartholomew and St. Martin and Saint Martin. And then a tropical storm watch is in effect for Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, Montserrat, Saba, and St. Eustatius, and then Guadalupe, although latest recent advisory just issued by the National Hurricane Center, 3:20, they actually put Guadalupe in a tropical storm warning. So general rundown of all the warnings that we have here, but I do want to bring you to the recon, and this just gives you an idea of how Jerry is doing right now. And I guess this also does kind of put into perspective the fact that Jerry is dealing with a lot of shear right now, because the latest National Hurricane Center intensity, if I could really quickly go back to show you here, has Jerry at 1,000 millibars, but the latest the recon, or at least the latest pass of the recon, only found 1,007 millibars within the system, and they barely even found here a closed low-level center. So probably Jerry dealing with very strong shear right now, that maybe the current low-level center is being ejected very, very quickly to the north. Maybe this is going to die, and especially since there's a lot of convective activity more to the southeast, maybe could we see a center relocation, and that might shift the track a little bit. Although either way, the northern Caribbean islands are going to get in on quite the impacts, with heavy rainfall, gusty winds, and shear, and that's going to happen probably tomorrow and into Saturday. But interesting nonetheless to see if we have a shift in the track. But either way, eventually these conditions should lessen up, because as Jerry moves northward of the island, obviously, again, not without bringing impacts, and probably pretty decent amount of impacts, this will eventually move northward and then potentially still strengthen into a hurricane, and the National Hurricane Center indicates that by Friday night, this should potentially become a hurricane, and then eventually this moves on off to the north, and then takes a curve off to the east, stays well east of Bermuda, and stays well east of the eastern seaboard of the United States, and especially the Bahamas. So for all of those here along the East Coast, and for those in the Bahamas, no need to worry about Jerry. But if you're in the northern Caribbean islands tonight, make sure to rush your plans to completion, and stay indoors tomorrow and Saturday, and brace, as Jerry will be moving through. Again, probably going to bring tropical storm conditions and heavy rainfall. Nothing too crazy, but obviously in some ways, a tropical storm is not something to just completely write off. We have had some pretty impactful tropical storms in the past, and this probably will be a pretty impactful system. But obviously, it's not like we're having, major Hurricane Irma plowing through the islands with 180-mile-per-hour winds, but still, keep in mind as Jerry will be moving through tonight. And then just really quickly, I want to show you the ship's output, just to give you an idea of how things are going to fare. And the ship's forecasts, too, seems to indicate that there will be intensification, as you can see here by this blue line on both of these two maps here. In fact, it looks like wind-wise, the ship brings this as strong as, I guess that's 75 knots, so 85 miles per hour. So Category 1 intensity, and let's actually really quickly see what the National Hurricane Center forecasts, actually right in line with the ships. So ships and National Hurricane Center forecasts a 100 not 185, but 85 mile per hour storm, so probably moderate Cat 1 strength. So that's probably going to add to the totals of yet another major hurricane, not a major hurricane, yet another hurricane here for the Atlantic hurricane season. But this is once again going to happen as this moves northward from the island, and while it is in the open tropical Atlantic. And then eventually, over the next several days, this will then probably die down, turn post-tropical, and then get absorbed by whatever low pressure system might be there out in the open Atlantic, and we won't have to deal with this. But once again, a threat right now for the Northern Caribbean islands tomorrow and Saturday. But then there's also Invest 96L, quite an interesting feature, and it is in the far northern Atlantic, so we do not have to worry about impacts with this. But you do notice it is producing quite the decent amount of convective activity right now. Kind of has that subtropical look going for it, where, it's a very compact small low with these convective bands in here that are trying to wrap around. So there is some level of organization, but this is in the very far northern Atlantic. In fact, this is as far as almost 45 degrees north in terms of latitude, so very, very far up there. And because of that, the sea surface temperatures are not very warm. In fact, right now, I think it's probably around in 21, 22, maybe 23 degrees Celsius waters. But that is a typical thing with subtropical systems, is because their energy, they drag from the atmosphere and from the ocean. So subtropical systems have a much easier time developing in cooler waters, since they don't necessarily rely exclusively on warm 26 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures in order to be able to develop. That's why they're called subtropical, because they're not purely tropical in their development mechanism, but they can transition into fully tropical systems. This is probably more than likely not going to do so, since this is just so far north. But it is an interesting feature nonetheless. And maybe this has a few more hours as it, still traverses here in marginal 22, 21 degrees Celsius waters. But probably in about a day or so, this is just going to get way too far north. The temperatures here get really icy cold, like 14, 12 degrees Celsius. Yeah, you're definitely not going to have any sort of major convective activity there. So this probably only has about a day left, and National Hurricane Center is probably not going to designate it. But it is an interesting feature nonetheless. And we'll see. Maybe the National Hurricane Center will actually maybe take a look at it either now or even in the postseason analysis, as that's happened before. And just as recently, 2023, if you remember that, there was a system in January. National Hurricane Center didn't designate it as it was happening, but they did designate it as an invest, and then they obviously took a look at it as the season came, and then ended up designating it as a subtropical, or I think even a fully tropical system in the end. So maybe that'll happen with 96L down the line. We'll have to see. But let's take a look at the GFS, the 12Z run, and I'm going to go over everything that is happening now, starting off with Jerry. And you can see that Jerry, passes just north of the islands. Maybe if there's a shift here, depending on what happens with this low-level center, maybe we might see a landfall on one of these northernmost islands here. But that's, again, maybe if the track shift happens here with Jerry. But other than that, going to make its closest approach to today and tomorrow. And then eventually as we head into tomorrow night and into Saturday, this will then begin to take a turn to the north. And then it'll probably strengthen pretty decently. It'll start feeling more impacts of, a more favorable outflow pattern. Shear should maybe lessen. I don't want to say hopefully, because we are talking about a hurricane, although this will be staying out to sea here. And then as you can see here on the GFS, this does strengthen pretty decently. Again, probably becomes a hurricane, but obviously this then starts to boot itself out towards the east and then eventually the northeast, as we do have this powerful low pressure here that develops, and a very broad low pressure as well that develops here off the east coast. And I already told you the story with this. This is going to bring quite a beating in terms of gusty winds and heavy rain to coastal North Carolina and eventually the Northeast as we head into the end of the week. And then eventually the energy with that is going to start moving eastward, and I guess it's going to latch on to Jerry and kick it out to sea. So Bermuda might also be able to stay pretty clear away from Jerry and won't have to worry about this, which is obviously a good thing. But obviously keep close in mind of potential rip current risks and high surf. That'll still be something that we'll be tracking with Jerry probably, and those impacts will probably be also felt along the East Coast too. And that's something that happens a lot with these tropical systems, even if they don't, make landfall, and even if they're all the way out in the far eastern Atlantic or in the open tropical Atlantic, not anywhere near landmass whatsoever, the swells that these systems generate could still get as far as the coastline. And as I've said before, rip currents too is also a major impact that happens with tropical systems. So keep in mind of the rip current risks, which will probably be pretty decent anywhere from the Caribbean islands through the Bahamas and up the East Coast, and obviously for Bermuda as well over the next several days and week here. And then eventually you do notice here in the Caribbean small little low pressure beginning to develop here. And then by the end of the week, as we head to this time next week on Thursday, looks like the GFS is showing development. And I've said before, the Caribbean gets more favorable as we head into the month of October, as it looks like we're going to have the Central American gyre pattern set up here, as we're going to have an MJO pulse move through. And looks like the GFS is actually starting to manifest this. And it is the GFS after all, I will say that, but it is one major global model showing development, and it happens within a week here. So we're going to have to watch this very closely. Maybe the National Hurricane Center might actually highlight a hatched area here in the Caribbean in about a day or so. Especially if the signal keeps up on the models, and obviously we'll be looking at other models too to see if any signal grows. But I mentioned a few days ago, the Eastern Caribbean tends to be favorable. No, actually more like the Western Caribbean, but the Caribbean in general, especially the Western Caribbean around Central America, that is a hotspot for the month of October. We've seen development there before, and we've also seen development that has also gotten pretty strong in that region of the world this time of year. So we're going to have to watch very, very closely, see if that manifests into anything. Hopefully it doesn't, but obviously since it is within our neck of the woods, we'll be watching very closely. And obviously we'll be continuing to watch Jerry throughout today and tomorrow as it will approach the islands, and then eventually move on off to the north. But beyond that, not really much else happening for today's video, so we're going to end it off here. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, please, as always, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Make sure to share with family and friends as well, and others who might find this kind of content interesting. And with that being said, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And as always, I'll be back with more tomorrow.